The Mediterranean was calm that morning. Too calm for men flying at supersonic speed with live missiles under their wings. Somewhere over the blue expanse of Libya's coast, two fighter pilots locked eyes through their canopies. No radio warnings, no diplomatic cables, just two machines closing at lethal velocity, and two men silently calculating whether the next few seconds would rewrite history. This was not a battlefield marked by trenches or burning cities. It was empty sky and open water, yet the stakes were enormous. One wrong move here would not end with wreckage in the sea. It could pull nations into a war neither side officially wanted. The American pilots had been told they were enforcing international law. The Libyan pilots believed they were defending national sovereignty. Between those two convictions lay a razor-thin margin where restraint mattered more than firepower. In that suspended moment after the radar lock, before the missile launch, discipline mattered. Judgment mattered. Humanity mattered. Because once the first shot was fired, there would be no taking it back. And on August 18th, 1981, that shot was fired. The question that remains is not who won the fight in the sky, but how close the world came to losing something far greater. The confrontation in the sky did not begin with a missile launch. It began years earlier, with a line drawn on a map. Libya's leadership had declared the Gulf of Sidra to be sovereign national waters, extending far beyond what international maritime law recognized. The United States, along with most of the world, rejected the claim outright. To Washington, allowing it to stand would set a dangerous precedent, one where international law could be rewritten by force and proclamation. So the decision was made to challenge it. An American carrier group sailed deliberately into the disputed waters, not to provoke war, but to demonstrate a principle. The mission was simple on paper: freedom of navigation. In practice, it placed pilots and ships in a pressure cooker where every maneuver carried political weight. The first day unfolded almost casually. American fighters launched in waves, meeting Libyan aircraft that rose to challenge them. There were no shots fired, no radar locks, escalated into combat. One by one, Libyan jets were turned away, more than 70 of them by superior coordination, discipline, and presence alone. For the American pilots, the encounters felt controlled, even light-hearted. Some later described it as all fun and games, a test of nerves rather than a test of weapons. They flew professionally, confident in their aircraft, confident in their training, and confident that restraint would hold. But confidence has a way of blinding men to how quickly situations change. Early the next morning, two American fighters were already airborne, patrolling the same stretch of sky. The sea below looked unchanged. The mission parameters were the same. Nothing suggested that the day would be different. Then the radar screens lit up. An unidentified contact appeared, moving fast and directly toward them. No erratic behavior, no hesitation, just a straight-line approach that demanded attention. The American pilots reported the contact calmly and turned to intercept, following standard procedure. This was routine, or so it seemed. As they closed the distance, the shape of the aircraft became clear. Two Libyan fighters flying wingtip to wingtip, a formation that signaled intent rather than curiosity. At the same moment, a technical failure robbed one American jet of its radar picture, forcing reliance on visual contact alone. Still, there was no panic. Intercepts happened every day during standoffs like this. Pilots were trained to manage uncertainty, to assume professionalism on both sides. No one expected what came next. Because in the space between procedure and instinct, between routine and reality, someone would decide that restraint was no longer enough. And that decision would turn a political demonstration into a fight for survival in the open sky. At first, the intercept unfolded exactly as it had the day before. The American flight leader eased forward, closing the distance with practiced calm. His wingman drifted wider, creating space, an old habit, one drilled into naval aviators to preserve options when the unexpected happens. Below them, the Mediterranean shimmered under the rising sun. Then, in a fraction of a second, routine vanished. From beneath the wing of one Libyan aircraft, a sudden orange flash cut through the morning light. A thin trail of smoke followed, accelerating forward with terrifying purpose. There was no warning shot, no escalation in words. A missile had been fired. For a heartbeat, disbelief froze the moment. Intercepts did not begin this way. Not here. Not like this. The American pilot reacted instantly, hauling his aircraft into a violent turn as the missile streaked past, missing by yards. Training overrode shock. Muscle memory replaced thought. Over the radio came the words no pilot ever expects to say during a peacetime patrol. We've been fired on? That single sentence changed everything. What had been a political demonstration was now a lethal encounter. The rules that governed restraint gave way to the rules of survival. In the sky, there was no time to debate intent. Only action mattered. The American formation split. One aircraft turned toward the attacker. The other went after the second Libyan fighter, which was already breaking away, scattering into open sky. The engagement dissolved into chaos, two separate chases, unfolding at extreme speed. The pursuit was relentless. Twists, dives, high G turns that crushed bodies into seats. The Sidewinder missile was selected. The tone sounded. The trigger was squeezed. Nothing happened. A fault warning flashed. The missile refused to fire. There was no time to dwell on it. Every second allowed the enemy another chance to escape or to turn and fire again. Elsewhere in the sky, the second American pilot faced a different dilemma. His target curved toward the rising sun, and instinct screamed caution. Heat-seeking missiles could be fooled by the sun's glare. So he waited. 10 seconds passed. 10 long seconds where the enemy lived, simply because patience held the trigger. Then the Libyan jet turned. The missile launched cleanly, tracking straight and true. It struck the engine, tearing metal apart in a burst of flame. The aircraft fell, burning, as its pilot ejected into the sea below. But the fight was not over. Should the second aircraft be destroyed? Shoot him down. What followed was chaos compressed into seconds. A second missile that appeared to fail. A desperate switch to guns. And then, impossibly, the weapon corrected itself. It curved back into view and slammed into the fleeing jet, erupting in fire and debris. The sky fell silent. 2 enemy aircraft were gone. 2 pilots were alive. And the thin line between peace and war had been crossed and narrowly stepped back from. The moment the second aircraft disappeared in a burst of flame, the sky changed. There were no cheers, no sense of triumph. Only the sudden absence of motion where 2 fighters had been moments before. What remained were drifting fragments, a spreading column of smoke, and 2 parachutes descending slowly toward the sea. Adrenaline lingered, sharp and disorienting. The American pilots steadied their aircraft, breathing heavy, scanning their instruments, replaying the last seconds in their minds. Combat had a way of compressing time. What felt like an eternity had unfolded in less than 2 minutes. Only after the missiles were gone did the weight of the moment fully settle. Over the radio came a delayed transmission from the carrier group, authorization to defend themselves. It arrived after the fact, a reminder of how fast events had outpaced command and control. In the air, decisions had already been made. History had already moved. The response from the American flight leader was brief and factual. 2 enemy aircraft destroyed. No embellishment. No motion. Below them, Libyan rescue helicopters lifted off from the coast. Within an hour, both downed pilots were recovered alive from the water. Their survival mattered. Not just morally, but strategically. There would be no funerals to inflame public anger. No martyrs to rally around. The incident would remain contained. Back aboard the carrier, the atmosphere was restrained. Fellow pilots understood what had happened and what had almost happened. This was not a victory parade moment. It was a reminder of how thin the margin truly was. No medals were awarded. No public celebration followed. The engagement had lasted minutes, but its implications stretched far wider. The rules of engagement had worked, but only just. A single missile launch had dragged 2 nations to the edge of open conflict, stopped only by discipline, training, and a shared instinct to avoid escalation once survival was assured. Politically, the impact was muted. Relations between the 2 governments were already hostile. This encounter hardened positions but did not transform them. There were no retaliatory strikes, no widening conflict. The episode faded quickly from headlines. Yet, within military circles, it lingered. Analysts dissected every second. The missile failures, the radar malfunction, the sun's position, the restraint shown after the kills. Each detail became a lesson, studied not for glory, but for prevention. Because what mattered most was not that 2 aircraft were shot down. It was that the fighting stopped when it did. From Washington's perspective, the encounter was never meant to be a battle. It was meant to be a message. The United States had entered disputed waters to assert a principle that extended far beyond Libya. That international law could not be reshaped by unilateral claims enforced with military pressure. Backing down would not only legitimize one declaration, it would invite others to follow. Yet what unfolded in the sky revealed how fragile such demonstrations truly were. The American pilots had operated exactly as doctrine demanded. They avoided escalation. They intercepted professionally. And when fired upon, they responded with force that was decisive but limited. No pursuit toward Libyan airspace. No secondary strikes. No attempt to turn a defensive action into a broader confrontation. That restraint mattered. Within military planning circles, the incident became a case study in rules of engagement under real pressure. It demonstrated that clear authorization frameworks worked, but only when combined with trust in pilots to act independently when seconds mattered more than orders. Globally, the response was muted, but observant. Other nations took note of how quickly a symbolic operation could slip toward war. The lesson was not about firepower alone. It was about escalation control, about knowing when to press and when to stop, about understanding that modern conflicts rarely announce themselves clearly before crossing irreversible thresholds. For Libya, the loss of 2 aircraft was a tactical setback, but the survival of its pilots prevented the incident from becoming a rallying cry. The absence of casualties blunted public outrage and limited political leverage. The confrontation ended not with speeches, but with silence. Culturally, the engagement resonated in a different way. It reinforced the image of the modern fighter pilot not as a reckless warrior, but as a disciplined professional operating within strict boundaries. That image would later echo through popular media, shaping how air combat was imagined by a generation far removed from the Cold War's daily tensions. Strategically, the message was clear on all sides. Deterrence did not require total war, but it demanded credibility. And credibility, as demonstrated that morning, rested not only on weapons but on judgment. Years later, the sky over the Gulf of Sidra looks no different. The sea is calm, the air is empty, no radar contacts, no warning tones. Yet the legacy of that morning has never truly faded. One of the American fighters involved was eventually restored and placed on display, its paint quiet and unmoving beneath museum lights. Visitors walk past it slowly, reading placards, taking photographs. Few can imagine what it felt like when that same aircraft shook under extreme G-forces, when decisions were measured not in minutes, but in heartbeats. For the pilots who flew that day, there was no victory parade, no defining headline to carry with them through life. What remained instead was memory, the awareness of how close restraint came to failure, and how irreversible the consequences would have been if it had. The encounter did not change the balance of power in the Mediterranean. It did not redraw borders or rewrite treaties. Its importance lies elsewhere. It revealed how modern war often begins not with declarations, but with misunderstandings, assumptions, and moments where pride collides with policy. It showed that advanced technology does not eliminate human judgment. It magnifies it. Missiles fail, sensors glitch, and still, someone must decide whether to press the trigger. Perhaps the most important outcome was what did not happen. There was no escalation, no widening conflict. 2 aircraft were lost, but a war was avoided. That restraint, quiet and unspectacular, may be the most enduring lesson of all. Today, as tensions once again rise in contested skies and seas around the world, the events of August 18, 1981 offer a sobering reminder. Power must be matched with discipline. Capability must be guided by judgment. And sometimes, the greatest victory is knowing when to stop. The battle ended in minutes. Its lesson still speaks. If this story leaves you with a question about restraint, about deterrence, or about how close the world often comes to catastrophe, share it. History is not only something we remember, it is something we continue to learn from.